Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about what are the basic skills that a medical biller and coder needs. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. I have been a medical coder for over 10 years. Aside from the coding, aside from the billing part, I'm just going to be talking about some of the basic skills today, like reviewing about communication and using basic computer software, all right, like Outlook, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. These are all really very important. And knowing how to navigate these things, while it's very basic, sometimes people don't know how to do the little detail things, okay? And I'm going to talk today about why those things are important. All right, so let's get into it. All right, first I will say this. YouTube is a wonderful place to look for any tutorial video on anything, literally anything. Any topic that you ever wanted to know about, YouTube has it. So if you are curious about how to use Outlook, Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, check out the tutorial videos that are all over YouTube about those topics if you are not familiar with using those. Now, because we are still in the pandemic, a lot of people are still working remotely. This is where email becomes very important. So the tone of your email and writing in clear, complete sentences. We are a society now that uses emojis and acronyms and abbreviations for everything. Writing has totally gone out the window. It is almost getting to be a lost art, unfortunately. And that's scary. It's a scary thought. And it even scares me even more when I hear about children not learning how to do cursive writing. It bothers me because cursive is very fundamental and basic when it comes to writing. And so a lot of times when I hear children have gotten away from it, it's bothersome because I think it's a small thing to a lot of people, but the impacts of it are long lasting. And so that's something that I think is still important. And in writing and being able to express yourself clearly is just seem to be floating away as well. So I just hope that if you hear me when I say this, that being a good writer is important, that you don't get scared off either, because everybody has the ability to be a good writer. It doesn't matter if you haven't written before or if you don't like to do these things. You have to get this stuff out of your head. I don't like to do writing, or I don't like to talk to people, or I don't like to do this. You've got to get that out of your head, because there are these things that we have to have as coders. And a lot of times I see when people, they're let to be, that particular skill, oh, well, they don't do that, so we're not going to worry about that with them. So we'll just, pass this on to another person to do. I think if you are working with a particular provider, you have to be able to do everything for them. I mean, as far as like being able to talk to them or being able to write them a good email that's understandable and clear in what your message is. Because it's never a good thing. And it's never a good thing if you have to have somebody else to speak for you. You have to be able to speak for yourself. And being a medical coder, you have to speak for yourself. Because at the end of the day, all the codes that we pick and all the things that we do, it is our responsibility, and it comes back to us. Because when we're audited and we're in the hot seat, why did you pick this? You have to be able to stand up for yourself. And that is not only to your auditor, but it is also to a provider, or it's also to anybody else who is auditing you. So that is one of the things that it's a skill that has to be built, those good communication skills. It starts with writing. It starts with being clear about what you're thinking and saying it in a way that is professional. Always with email, you have to remember that anybody can see this email. Anybody, at any time. So if that email gets taken out of context, always know that you have the original email and that you can explain yourself. And if you can look at this email and say, I can explain this, then you're okay. But if you send off an email and it's written like, if you're upset or something like that, you never write an email when you're upset. Whatever you do, never write an email. I know a lot of times it's like you get that hair trigger, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna send this and I'm gonna say this. Take a deep breath and walk away from your computer. I do not care where you are or what you're doing. Stop and walk away. Give yourself time to think about what you're gonna say before you say it, which is why writing well and writing very clearly is so important. Because when we let our emotions take over, it's when things can get a little hairy, you know, so you don't want that. You always want to be able to engage with your provider and make sure that it is a positive experience. And yes, we all have human moments where things don't always make sense to us, or maybe we took something wrong, or maybe somebody else took something that we said wrong. But it's all about making sure that the communication stays professional, and it starts with the writing. If you are a person who does not like to write, I challenge you today to start writing anything. Just get a blank notebook. And if you had a wonderful day, you can write, I had a wonderful day because, and then you start to describe your day. And you'll start to get better at it. It'll start to be more natural. A lot of times I think people don't like to write because they feel like it's unnatural to them. They never had a journal growing up. They didn't do Dear Diary. They didn't do any of those things. So being able to expressly communicate and expressly be able to say things is really important. You know, back in the day when teenagers, when they kept journals, right? And you hear about them, like movies from the 50s and 60s and things like that. They had these journals and it was like Dear Diary, and they would say all these things. They did it like up to the 80s in movies. And women and even males were very expressive at the time. You know, they could express what they were thinking and what they were feeling. They could talk it out and things like that. And now kids today, it's emojis and abbreviations. And when you try to talk to a young person, it's like, okay, well, what are you trying to say? And they just sort of don't know what to say because they weren't ever, that was something that kind of went away, the journal writing. So that's why I say that it's a skill that you have to exercise, and it starts with yourself. And you know, journal writing, while it may seem like, oh, what am I doing this for? It's actually very therapeutic. It is a great way to get your emotions out. And sometimes we don't know how to say things, but writing it is so much easier to do. So when you are doing this challenge and you're journaling, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but just make it into sentences. I had a good day because, or my day was rough today because of, and then you can talk about these things. I don't recommend making lists because that's not technically writing, but it is just sort of list making. You don't want to list make. You want to talk it out in sentences. So the more you get practice on that, the easier it's going to be when you start to communicate with your providers. And it's really, really something, because even when I've had to help coworkers before who said, I don't know how to write a letter to a provider. I don't know how to say this. So the thing that I always ask them is, what are you trying to say? I have them speak it to me. Like, what are you trying to say? And they'll say, well, I'm trying to explain to them X, Y, and Z. So I said, okay, so how are you going to start out with this? And I always ask them the same question. How are you going to start by saying this? I don't know. That's what they tell me. I don't know. So when I go back to asking them, how would you feel if you saw this? If somebody was sending this to you, would you want somebody to be giving you just like a whole bunch of words for nothing, or do you want them to get to the point? Well, obviously get to the point, right? So I said, how can we say this in as few words as possible, but still make sense? So what they do is they write it out, and then we start cutting down. Okay, you don't need to say this, you don't need to say this, you don't need to say this. It got easier after a while with my coworkers when they were writing, because when I was having them do this, and then they were like, okay, well, I know I can cut this out, but it was so much easier for them to just write it all out and then cut it down to the most important parts. So getting back to that journaling is going to help you to start organizing the way that you're thinking and the way that your thought process is going. That's sort of why I tell them to do it that way, because it is like journaling, but you want them to get to the point. And so it has helped. The communication stays clear and effective and to the point, and that's really what you want. And it starts off with the tone of your emails and, how are you doing things and things like that. You never want to apologize, and that is something that I'm going to keep saying and reiterating every time. As a medical biller and coder, even if you're just a biller or if you're just a medical coder, you never apologize for asking a question. Never start with, I'm sorry, XYZ. I'm sorry, I have a question. No, I have a question. And it's not so that you can be, show off like you're tough or something like that, but it's to show that you're there for business and that the reason that you are going to them is because you're trying to help them, but you need clarification or something needs to, have more information for it or whatever the case may be. But you never apologize. Apologies should be for if you've done something. You haven't done anything. When you are asking a question, if something is not clear, something's not clear. Not everybody communicates well. This is why we have to ask questions so we can have thought-provoking conversations, right? Because when you start asking questions, people start to give you a little bit more information, and that's going to up your communication game. And that's what you want. You want to be able to communicate. I have providers who know they can come to me, and they will literally sit there and they will talk to me because they know they can talk to me because I listen and I can say, okay, well, whatever the case may be, like if you have a question about a scenario or something like that, and they know that I can explain it. Or I've had other providers bring other different specialty providers. They'll bring their specialty friend over to me and say, Bleu, can you explain this to this person because we can't get anybody to explain this to us. Can you explain it? Oh, okay. And then I'll be able to explain it. So getting to the point is the name of the game. So that's why I tell you guys to journal write for yourself. And even if you throw the pages away, just get it down, look at it, and then that way you'll start to get better. And when you're reading, pay attention to the sentence structure. Pay attention to their punctuation, because obviously these books have gone through publishers and editors. And so it's been proofread so many times. And because of that, you'll be able to really start to get better with writing. I love to write. I've always been a writer. I've been a writer since I was a very small child. It's always been something. I have journals and journals and journals and journals because writing is fundamentally very important. And at the end of the day, when you are trying to communicate with highly educated people, you've got to up your game. And that is something that will come with time. So if this is your first time in the medical field, don't worry. I was there once myself because I did not start out with wanting to be in the medical field at all. Okay. And like I said, if you've watched any of my other videos, I thought that medical coding had everything to do with needles. I didn't know that it had nothing to do with needles, but I was very convinced. Okay. I was like, oh yeah, I don't do nothing with needles. Not me. No, I can't do needles. I can't do blood. You know what I'm saying? So, but that it turned out not to be the case. It's all about reading. I got that down. Reading is another thing. Reading, you have to be able to see and comprehend the documentation. When it comes to medical terminology, this is a different language. This is not your everyday run-of-the-mill stuff, okay? Everything that is talked about in medical documentation is going to be written differently depending on the provider. depending on their level of expertise, depending on their level of detail. Everything is going to be different. So this is why I've said before, book coding and real world coding are two different things. And I say this because of that. I have seen providers who will write out diagnoses that are not in the book. And I have to take my knowledge and what I know and be able to figure this stuff out. I've never been to medical school. Vast majority of medical coders have never been to medical school, but we've got to know what they know. It takes time and it takes patience. So time and patience is another skill that you will have to possess, because it's not going to be an easy thing. And I've seen people, some viewers have written in, they said they want an easy job. So what coding specialty is easiest? Everybody's easy meter is different. For me, orthopedics is very easy. However, if you ask a bunch of coders, even seasoned ones, they will laugh in your face and say orthopedics is not easy. But if you tell me cardio to me is a challenge, all right? And it's just like, okay, but in the beginning, it was just like, it felt impossible because of the complexity of the documentation. And I was still green. I was very green. I was still a very, very green coder. And I was just like, how am I ever going to understand any of this tricuspid valve and all this other, I don't, until I started reading. So investing time, even when you're not at work and you're just reading or looking at your whatever specialty you're coding for, looking at websites that are dedicated to that particular specialty and seeing what information they have to offer. Because really, at the end of the day, understanding all of this language is going to help you leaps and bounds. And you won't be as overwhelmed when you look at the documentation, because your research will have prepared you for this. And when you are in those settings and you know you have questions, go to the internet and start to look things up, because you will start to be able to find answers out there. But always look for reputable resources. Try to stay away from the discussion threads. I've seen a few discussion threads. Some of the discussion threads I've seen have been helpful. Okay, I will say that. I did have one that we were brand new to using a Mako machine. Now, Mako is an orthopedic machine. It's very fascinating. If you have a chance to look it up, it's Mako, Mako. And I did look at one discussion thread, and it was a doctor that was talking about it, and he explained it perfectly. And now that was a trustworthy resource because he broke it down completely and he put it into layman's terms for us coders to understand, because he, I think, was a coder himself. So it was a wonderful way to be like, okay, now I understand. But then I've seen some of these discussion threads where they have coders on there talking to each other, and I'm like, no, you can't. Even the book says you can't, I'm like, I don't know how you arrive at that, and so I don't know. And I can't comment because these are closed discussion threads. And so it's just like, it's just information that's out there on the internet, and so it's just like, what do you do? So if you're brand new, just sort of really look at the resource that the source that you're getting your information from, and make sure that it is reputable. Always go with things like the Merck manual to understand, or if you're going with a specialty association website, that is totally fine as well. But at the end of the day, you want to take it from a reputable resource, okay? Not just somebody that's saying, oh, well, we do it this way just because, and they can't give you a reference. Don't ever fall into that trap, because sometimes people get very frustrated and they just want the answer. So they'll just take anybody's advice. And somebody may say, well, we do it this way, but not really knowing the full context of what is actually happening at that other person's facility. So that's something that is very important to know. There's a distinguishment there. You need to be able to understand those things, So I've had providers who get with their other provider friends And for whatever reason, they don't have access. This other providers don't have access to coders at their facility. So they sort of get together and brainstorm and do whatever. And maybe they're listening to an office manager who is not a coder. And they talk to my provider, and then my provider gets excited because they think, oh, well, this is something that Bleu hasn't told me. So let me go and run and tell her. So they try to change their documentation. They try to go with the same way that these other people did. I'm like, you can't do that. That's not according to the book. You can't do that when they tell me, you know. And they're very excited about it. And I'm like, well, I'm glad they're trying to learn, but I got you. You know, we got this. You know, don't try to change. And then when I show them that whatever way they were trying to, whatever combo they were trying to use was not really going to go together, they were like, oh, So I said it's all about what's being documented, and what you've got is what you're telling me that you're doing, and what you're documenting is already lining up. So don't change anything, you know, because it's one of those things. But again, communication is really, really key. And to close out the video as well, one thing I do want to talk about is accents. Heavy, thick accents. If you have a heavy, thick accent, please work on it, because a lot of times I have heard from other providers as well that it's very hard sometimes to understand us coders as it is. But if you have a thick accent, it makes it a little bit harder. And I know with providers, they have accents too. So the point being is you always want to make sure that you're very clear when you're speaking or with your communication in writing. You want to make sure that everything lines up. So if you have to work on yourself and you have to work on shining these things up, then that's what you got to do. And there's lots of voice coaches that are even on YouTube that you can use. And I always recommend watching your favorite movie and speaking back how they are speaking. And that's how you can change your voice, and you can change, or you can get your speech to sound more clear, because you're going to be sounding like whoever it is that you're trying to sound like. So that's just a bit of advice there. But only because I want you guys to be successful. This is why I tell you guys the things that I tell you. And sometimes I hear, how Bleu, you're really blunt. I understand that. But at the same time, somebody has to tell you. And I don't want people to be out there like struggling when all it would just take is somebody to just tell you straight, this is what you have to do. These are some of the things that, you know, it would be helpful if you did. Okay. Never trying to put anybody down ever, you know, but always trying to help people better themselves. I know that I'm on my journey for self-improvement every single day. There's things that I know that I need to work on for me personally, and I do them every day. I chip at it a little bit every single day. It's just like exercising. You got to stay consistent with it. And that's the key, is staying consistent. So that way you can be healthy, and you can be able to focus and do all the things that you want to do with your goals in being a good high caliber medical coder. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. All right, so I'm going to wrap this one up. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And tomorrow is the #1 question and answer show about medical coding, airing on Tuesday, Q&A Tuesday. I hope you're excited, because I'm excited. I will go ahead and wrap this one up. So if you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider, or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. I will see y'all next time. Bye.